The Mother of Wolves, a full-length werewolf romance audiobook by Grace Cruz. Hope you enjoy. Chapter 1. The Cold Seat of Power. The cold weight of the Alpha King's absence was a crown Lyanna wore every day. It was not the circlet of hammered gold that pressed on her brow, but the heavy, empty silence beside her in the massive bedchamber. She lay rigid, listening. The Obsidian Citadel, a fortress built into the jagged mountain, always whispered, its dark stone heart humming with the restless tension of a pack without its true alpha. Lyanna hated the whispering. Not only that, the silence felt like a physical threat. Every night she listened for the sounds that meant her 3 children, the prophesied children, were safe in the nursery wing, 3 halls away. "You're not sleeping, Luna." Still, she didn't turn to face Alara, her oldest and most trusted guard. Alara was a rock, a solid presence whose scent of pine and worry was always close. "I am watching, Alara," Lyanna murmured. Her voice was low, careful, used more for command these days than for conversation. The king is gone. Watching is all that keeps the walls up. With every heartbeat, Lyanna remembered Corvin's scent, smoke, leather, and wild forest. That scent was absent now, lost somewhere in the distant, brutal war that had swallowed him. Maybe it was fate that left her here. She didn't know what scared her more, the thought of Corvin dead, or the reality of the kingdom realizing just how alone she was. Alara's voice was gentle. "The children are safe. Commander Gale is on the nursery corridor. He's loyal." "Loyal is not enough," Lyanna whispered, finally turning to the light filtering through the arrow slits. Truth be told, loyalty felt like a brittle thing, easily snapped by ambition or fear. "We have 3 future alphas, Alara, 3 marks on them that rival packs believe are keys to power. Lord Valerius." Alara inhaled sharply. In the quiet that followed, the name felt like a rock hitting glass. Valerius. The powerful noble whose ambition was a known, festering wound in the pack's side. "Valerius is miles away in his eastern holdings," Alara insisted. "He's closer than you think." As the silence stretched, Lyanna slipped out of the bed, her movements fluid and silent, like oil over stone. She didn't bother with a robe. Her long, scarred legs were enough to command attention. "He's not fighting the king's war, he's fighting my peace." Her bones remembered him. She had known Valerius since they were cubs. She knew his hunger. It was a cold, calculating hunger, far more dangerous than the open rage of a battlefield foe. What followed was a quiet dressing ritual. Lyanna pulled on her simple, dark wool tunic, more warrior than queen. "Luna," Alara began, before the words left her lips. Lyanna preempted her. "The war report, Alara. I want the truth, not the version the court hears." Next, Alara retrieved a tightly rolled parchment secured with a common leather cord, not the ornate seals used for public dispatches. Despite that, the simplicity of the cord only highlighted the danger of its contents. Lyanna unrolled it. The scent of foreign pine and dried blood hit her instantly, making her stomach clench. It was a scout's secret message. "The war is stalemate. The king's whereabouts remain unknown. Whispers say captured, maybe worse. Rival Alpha, Vorlag, the northern bear, prepares to advance, claiming the children's bloodline is weakened." Lyanna's heart skipped. The air thickened with her rising tension. Weakened. That was the language of vultures. "Vorlag is a fool," Alara said, reading over her shoulder. "He only respects strength." "Exactly," Lyanna replied, folding the parchment so tightly the paper cracked. "That's why I must show him strength, the kind that slices, the kind that doesn't waste time negotiating." In that moment, her misbelief, "the blade alone suffices," hardened. She knew what she had to do. Be utterly ruthless. Her initial goal was survival, and the feral blade was the fastest path. Soon after, she headed to the council chamber. She felt it, clear as day. She was not a comforting Luna, she was a deadly one. Her world tilted. She had to be the weapon. Can I be the shield and the sword? Can I be the mother and the murderer? She asked herself, her internal monologue a flurry of simple, stark questions. The obsidian walls of the citadel, cold and imposing, seemed to judge her choices. Between one breath and the next, she decided. No love, no softness, only the blade. Meanwhile, in the court below, Lord Einar was already waiting, ready to test the limits of her resolve with his greedy little request. Lyanna's internal tension coiled tight. She was walking straight into her first test of the day. Chapter 2, The Severed Hand, Lyanna's Flaw. The council chamber was a hushed arena. The sense of cheap perfume and old anxiety hung low. Lyanna took her seat on the throne. It was cold. The stone never seemed to warm in winter. She felt trapped, like a silver coin held between two freezing fingers. Lyanna sat the throne not as a queen, but as a sentinel. As the silence stretched, Lyanna did not look at Lord Einar when he spoke. Lord Einar, a barrel-chested alpha from the southern grainlands, began his whine. With respect, Luna, the king's standing order for grain levies is still in effect, Lyanna cut him off, her voice sharp as glass. She let her wolf's keen hearing catch Einar's quick, nervous inhale. Einar shifted, the leather of his coat squeaking loudly, a jarring sound in the tense room. My people face starvation in the south, Luna. To send away half of our stores is foolish. It is an unwise decree in the king's absence. In the echo of his voice, the word unwise was not just a comment on logistics. It was a stone thrown directly at her temporary authority. Lyanna felt a familiar, hot flare of rage deep in her chest. He thinks because I am Luna, I am soft. He thinks because Corvin isn't here, he can take what he wants. With every heartbeat, her protective instinct surged, demanding a brutal response. You will not suggest revision, Lord Einar, she snarled, leaning forward. The shift was subtle but terrifying. Her golden eyes flared, and the low, guttural vibration of a growl rumbled deep in her throat. And all at once, everything changed. Einar's face went ash-white. He saw the predator, not the regent. As if pulled by a string, he fell to one knee, a clumsy, frightened bow. My apologies, Luna. I spoke out of turn. I am loyal. Loyalty is measured in actions, Einar, not empty words, Lyanna ground out. Her wolf pressed forward, ready to taste blood. Because of that, her body language was a direct threat. This is how you rule, a dark voice whispered, through fear. The levy is to feed the North March garrisons, she continued, her voice still raw. Garrisons that stand between your people and Vorlag. I will not have my soldiers starve because a petty lord cannot manage his stores. That's why she had to be ruthless. She had to be the blade. She didn't know what scared her more, the fear she saw in Einar's eyes, or the ease with which she could conjure it. Your grain levy is due tomorrow at dawn, she commanded, standing now. Her height, her power, seemed to consume the room. Do not fail the kingdom. You are dismissed. Einar scrambled out like a rat leaving a sinking ship, yet the victory felt hollow. Instead of satisfaction, a cold weight settled in her chest. As the wind shifted, bringing the faint, stale scent of the citadel's confinement, Lyanna sank back onto the throne. But no one loves a blade. The truth felt like a physical pain. She had chosen the easy terror of the wolf over the slow, difficult cultivation of loyalty. What's worse, she knew Einar wasn't acting alone. The pressure points he hit, the question of her competence, the appeal to regional self-interest were too precise. Someone was testing her. Moments later, the scent of fresh pine and frantic speed filled the hallway, announcing Alara's return. Alara burst in, her face etched with a fear that Lyanna had never seen. Luna, a messenger from the Eastern Holdings, Valerius's territory. He insists on seeing you alone. Lyanna stiffened, rising to her full, ready height. Valerius. The antagonist had moved. As the truth unraveled, Lyanna knew this was the real start of the fight. Bring him, Lyanna commanded, her voice steady. With his scent in the air, she prepared for the next wave. This wasn't about grain. This was about power. Chapter 3. The Threat Unveiled. The messenger, a young, nervous scout named Rhys, smelled of long travel and pure, unadulterated fear. As the sky darkened, shadows danced between them in the council room. "Speak, Rhys, clearly," Lyanna instructed, her gaze never leaving his trembling hands. In the quiet that followed, Rhys forced himself to meet her eyes, his words tumbling out fast. "It is Lord Valerius, Luna. He didn't send a threat. He sent an offer." Lyanna arched a brow. "Valerius offers nothing but deceit. What is the substance?" "He proposes a temporary regency," Rhys whispered, the words loaded with treason. "He says the king's absence proves the royal line is vulnerable. He would assist your rule, protect the children, and merge his military strength with the Citadel's." That night, Lyanna saw the entire poisonous plan. Valerius wasn't attacking. He was worming his way in, claiming legitimacy. "He wants to neutralize me slowly, then claim the children." "And what price does Valerius ask for this assistance?" Lyanna asked, her voice dangerously soft. "He asks for the formal betrothal of your eldest son to his youngest daughter, binding the houses and immediate access to the royal treasury for his garrisons," Rhys admitted, eyes darting to Alara. Not only that, Valerius was sending a pack of his most ruthless men to escort her family back to his eastern holdings, ostensibly for safety. They were due to arrive by morning. "The offer is refused," Lyanna said simply. "Tell Valerius—" But then, Rhys swallowed hard, cutting her off with a desperate look at Alara. "Wait, I have another message. This one. It's about the king, Luna." Lyanna froze. Corvin. She felt it, clear as day. This was the true shock. Rhys handed her another scroll, damp with sweat. It was from a contact deep in the borderlands. Lyanna read it quickly, her breath catching. The words were simple, but they shattered the world she had built. "King Corvin is not dead. He escaped captivity. He is deep in the shadowed wilds, scarred, half-feral, untethered." Her heart skipped. Corvin was alive, but half-feral. The trauma had broken him. As her wolf stirred, a deep, aching mix of joy, terror, and possessiveness surged. She had always fought to be the blade. Now, she had to face a wounded beast that was both her love and her greatest threat. What kind of monster is waiting for me? Just like that, everything changed. The external threat of Valerius was now secondary to the internal, devastating threat of her husband's return. The unique element of the story had landed. Valerius knows, Lyanna realized, the truth hitting her with brutal clarity, which meant this was his true opportunity. He could claim the throne was vacant because the king was mad, and he could seize the children under the guise of saving them from the savage king. "We have to move," Lyanna commanded, her voice regaining its warrior edge. With a single glance, she signaled Alara. "We're not fighting Valerius here. We're running through the shadowed wilds. The Citadel's rigid walls are a trap. They expected her to defend this stone fortress. Instead, Lyanna would use the feral chaos of the borderlands to hide and heal." Before she could move, Alara grasped her arm. "Luna, running with 3 children and a half-mad king, that is suicide." "No," Lyanna corrected, her golden eyes blazing with renewed purpose. "It's the only way to save them all. Valerius's men arrive at dawn. We leave tonight. Prepare supplies, weapons, and silence. We're heading to the shadowed wilds. I'll take the children now." As if fate demanded it, the low, chilling sound of a hunting horn drifted through the thick stone walls. It was an enemy signal. They were coming early. Without warning, Lyanna shifted, her movement a blur, tearing through the fine wool of her dress. Her coat of silver-tipped black fur replaced the robes of the Luna. She was a massive, terrifying shadow. The scent of her raw, feral intent made Rhys gasp and Alara step back in awe. "I am the blade." Her body moved on instinct. She was done ruling. She was going back to hunting. She was going to be the mother of wolves. Chapter 4. The Blade Unleashed. A beat later, the hunting horn sounded again, closer now, sharp enough to cut through the thick stone walls of the citadel. It wasn't the distant, mournful call of a scout. This was a war blast, mocking and loud. Lyanna stood in the council chamber, her massive wolf form filling the space, silver-tipped fur bristling. Her deep, guttural growl vibrated off the obsidian. "They are inside the outer walls," Alara yelled, dropping her sword as she scrambled back from Lyanna's sudden, terrifying transformation. The scout Reese simply collapsed. With a single glance, Lyanna assessed the situation. Valerius hadn't waited. Because of that, her quick shift into the Alpha Queen wolf was the only option. Regal bearing was useless now. Only instinct mattered. "The children!" Lyanna commanded, her voice a series of throaty, explosive barks that only Alara, her bondmate, could fully decipher. "Get them. Now." She didn't know what scared her more, the sound of the fighting outside, or the terrifying surge of primal joy that came with being fully wolf again. It felt right. It felt like the only time she wasn't trapped. As her wolf stirred, Lyanna shot out of the chamber, her powerful limbs driving her down the cold, echoing hallways toward the nursery wing. The air shifted from stale anxiety to the sharp, metallic tang of blood and adrenaline. As if the world narrowed, every sense focused. She could smell the cheap leather of the rival Alpha's uniforms, the fear of the young guards, and most importantly, the innocent, clean scent of her sleeping cubs. In the span of a breath, Lyanna reached the corridor. The fighting was fierce. 3 massive, brown-furred wolves from a lesser rival pack, likely hired by Valerius, were tearing through the loyal garrison. "Luna!" Gale, the nursery commander, cried out, his arm hanging limp as he wrestled a brute twice his size. Without thinking, Lyanna hurled herself into the fray. She didn't bite to wound, she bit to kill. The first brown wolf didn't even see her coming. Lyanna's jaws locked around its neck, crushing bone and windpipe instantly. She tossed the heavy carcass aside like a broken branch. The second rival wolf saw the terrifying alpha female, twice as fast, black as shadow, and driven by a maternal fury that burned hotter than any territorial claim. Even so, the rival lunged, desperation giving it speed. Lyanna met it midair. What followed was a blur of teeth and claws, a ferocious, primal ballet. Lyanna didn't bother with technique. She relied on pure, savage power. She ripped and tore, her wolf responding to the threat with chilling efficiency. The rival screamed, a sound of pain and utter surprise, as Lyanna pinned it, her muzzle close to its ear. "They call me Mother," she whispered, the words a low, lethal snarl. "But I am also the blade that guards their future." Then, she silenced it permanently. Rather than stopping, she checked the nursery door. It was still sealed. As if summoned, Alara arrived, breathless, her face streaked with soot and panic. "The back gate is breached, they're pouring in. Lyanna, you have to run!" Alara screamed, barely containing the fear that her own instincts screamed at her. "Flee!" Next, Lyanna shifted, the painful, hot transformation process forcing the wolf back into human form, but retaining the feral, aggressive energy. She was naked, bloody, and terrifyingly efficient. "We cannot fight them here," Lyanna gasped, pulling a dark cloak from a supply box. Because the citadel walls were too predictable and too easy to surround, because she needed the chaos of the wilds to hide her children and plan. Soon after, she flung open the nursery door. The 3 children, her prophesied heirs, were huddled silently beneath the heaviest bed, their small eyes wide with confusion. "My loves," Lyanna whispered, her voice rough, but instantly soothing. "It's time for an adventure." From there, the plan was simple. Lyanna would carry the youngest, and the 2 older children, 8 and 6, would hold tight to Alara's cloak. They needed speed, silence, and above all, the wilds. "Take the secret passage to the lower kennels," Lyanna instructed Alara. "We meet at the South Watch Tower. If I'm not there, do not wait. Go straight to the shadowed wilds. Do you understand? Yes, Luna, Alara replied, her voice trembling but resolute. Lyanna looked at her children, their small, brave faces. This is not the life I wanted for you. Without another word, she sealed their fate. They were no longer royalty. They were prey. Lyanna knew the Citadel would soon be crawling with Valerius's men. She was running straight into the chaos. Chapter 5. The Feral King. Meanwhile, the roar of battle was still echoing faintly behind them. Lyanna, back in wolf form, was a blur of focused speed and endurance, carrying her smallest cub securely in her mouth. Alara and the two other children were struggling to keep up, their small legs pumping through the dense undergrowth outside the Citadel walls. They had made it into the first dense stretch of forest. The terrifying quiet was almost worse than the noise of the raid. We have to stop, Luna, Alara pleaded, dropping to her knees. The children can't run anymore. Lyanna shifted back, breathing hard, the wild scent of pine and rich earth overwhelming the last hints of fear. Because of that, the air itself felt like freedom. As the bond pulsed between them, the deep, ancient connection between true packmates, Alara placed a small, shaking hand on Lyanna's bloody shoulder. We need shelter. Lyanna nodded, her eyes constantly scanning the tree line. She felt it, clear as day, the low thrum of pursuit closing in. Before either could speak, a flash of movement made them freeze. A figure stumbled out of the shadows. It was Rhys, the young scout from the council, barely alive. He was badly wounded, a deep gash tearing across his chest, smelling sickeningly of fresh blood and approaching death. Rhys! What are you doing here? Lyanna demanded, dropping to her knees beside him. With a single glance, she knew he wouldn't last. He was their last direct link to the Citadel. Valerius. He sealed the gates, Rhys gasped, his breath ragged. He told the pack, the official story. What story? Alara whispered, horror gripping her face. He says you murdered the children, Luna. Rhys choked out, his voice thin as a dying leaf. He says the prophecy drove you mad, and he came to save the line. Next, he claimed the throne. He is declaring himself regent, to protect the pack from your feral tyranny. Lyanna recoiled as if struck. The betrayal was complete. Valerius hadn't just attacked, he had poisoned her name. Not only that, he had justified her worst impulse, her use of feral terror to steal everything. How will she ever clear her name now that the entire kingdom believes she's a mad mother who killed her own cubs? This was one of the open loops that would haunt her. To make things worse, Rhys clawed weakly at her arm, his dying grip surprisingly strong. The king, Lyanna. They said he was sighted, deep in the wilds, the real king. Corvin is alive, Lyanna stated, the words catching in her throat, tasting of ash and incredible hope. Yes, but he's not whole. Rhys's eyes rolled back, unfocused. The war, the captivity, it broke his mind. He's been running, naked, a savage. They call him the Feral King. He is a danger to himself and to anyone who finds him. Valerius has offered a bounty. Bring back the king's head or the king's body for proper burial. In that moment, Lyanna felt the world shatter and rebuild. The threat was no longer external, it was internal, it was her husband. Because Valerius made her a feral tyrant, because Corvin was now a savage beast, because her children were hunted, the simple survival goal was gone. It had been replaced by a quest for redemption, healing, and reunion. Rhys sighed, his final breath escaping him as a soft, relieved whistle. As the echo faded, Lyanna stood over his body, feeling the cold certainty of her new, impossible task. She had to hide her children from Valerius's hunters and from her own half-mad husband. Then she had to somehow tame the powerful primal beast that was her king. He will not die out here, Lyanna vowed, her voice raw, directed at the vast, uncaring wilds. With every step he took away from his pack, Corvin became more feral. Lyanna knew the process. If she didn't find him soon, he would be lost forever. "We follow the scent of the king," Lyanna told Alara, her voice hard as diamond. "He is our shield and our ultimate risk. We are going deeper. We are going where Valerius's soldiers fear to tread." She didn't know what scared her more, the sheer numbers Valerius was throwing at them, or the thought of facing the man she loved, only to find a monster staring back. The journey into the shadowed wilds was now a descent into the very real, primal heart of her own family's trauma. The kingdom believed she was a mad murderer. But deep down, she knew the truth. She was the only one left who could save the Alpha King from his own wolf. Chapter 6. The Lair of the Luna. Slower, atmospheric, heavy on sensory details and internal reflection. Lyanna's wolf becoming dominant, the children's vulnerability, the physical demands of survival. The shadowed wilds did not forgive weakness. The dense forest floor was a treacherous mix of slick mud, moss-covered stones, and sharp, broken slate that snagged at Lyanna's human feet. As the wind shifted, it carried the potent, complex scent of the wilds, damp earth, dying leaves, and the distant, ever-present musk of the wolves that called this place home. It was primal, unforgiving, and exactly where Lyanna needed to be. She felt it, clear as day, the Citadel's oppressive chill melting away, replaced by the raw, empowering energy of the wilderness. Because of that, her own wolf pressed forward, closer to the surface than ever before. Lyanna was more comfortable here, in the cold, brutal truth of the forest, than she had been in the gilded cage of the throne. Next, Lyanna found their sanctuary. It was a shallow, rocky outcrop, hidden behind a cascade of thick, thorn-laced vines. It smelled dry, protected, and private. "We stop here," Lyanna commanded, shifting back to her human form, briefly, to direct Alara. Even so, she kept a wolfish crouch, her muscles coiling and twitching beneath her skin. She had learned the hard way that she couldn't afford to be fully human for long. The 3 children, exhausted and pale, were immediately tucked into a dry hollow. The oldest, 8-year-old Lysander, looked up at his mother with wide, questioning eyes. "Is the adventure over, Mama?" Lyanna forced a gentle, human smile that felt foreign on her lips. "Not yet, my brave cub. This is just the rest stop." How can she lie to them? Her voice trembled internally, though her spoken words were steady, because their innocence was the last piece of peace she possessed. Meanwhile, Alara, ever practical, started clearing the perimeter, her knife flashing. "I'll set snares. We need meat, Luna. The children are hungry." "No snares," Lyanna corrected, her voice low. "Rather," she said, "I hunt. Snares leave tracks. I leave nothing." Without thinking, she shifted again. The transformation was less painful now, easier, faster. It was becoming her default state, a worrying sign of her internal flaw taking root. With his scent in the air, she was gone, a silent black blur melting into the trees. She needed to feed them, but more importantly, she needed to scout. She needed to find the king. Lyanna ran for what felt like hours, not following game trails, but following the faint, disturbed sign of a truly massive, uncontrolled alpha. It was not the proud, dominant scent of Corvin, her husband. Instead, it was the musky, confusing, and terrifying scent of a wolf running on pure, terrified instinct. By the time Lyanna returned, dragging a heavy, freshly killed stag, the children were asleep. Alara was staring into the fire, her shoulders slumped with weariness. "You smell like a phantom, Lyanna," Alara observed, not looking up. "You're spending too much time shifted. It's changing you." "It's saving us," Lyanna snapped, the wolf still too close to the surface. That's why she was impatient, why her human response was too sharp. "Be careful," Alara warned. "The wilderness takes the mind before the body. We need the Luna, not the savage." Lyanna dropped the stag with a heavy thud. In the quiet that followed, she let Alara's words sting. "She fears my strength. She fears the blade." But then, a different fear gripped her. If her own trusted guard feared her, what would the rest of the pack? What would Corvin see? Next, Lyanna cleaned the stag, her movements methodical and savage. She felt the cold satisfaction of providing. Survival is a kind of love, she thought, justifying the growing ferocity. She was ready to be the beast that ensured her cubs lived. But first, she had to find the beast that wore her king's face. Come morning, she would begin the hunt for Corvin. Chapter 7. The Feral Confrontation. Come morning, the air was still frigid, tasting of iron and dew. Lyanna left the children in Alara's absolute care, shifting immediately into wolf form. She followed the trail of the feral king south, toward the deepest, most shadowed ravines where sunlight rarely touched the ground. The trail was unmistakable: broken underbrush, scarred trees, and the overwhelming scent of a dominant male in distress. As the bond pulsed, a deep, aching recognition began to stir within her, a pain that was both physical and psychic. Finally, she found him. He was massive, larger than she remembered, leaner and scarred, his fur a dull, matted gray, caked with mud and ancient blood. He was hunched over a stream, drinking like a hunted thing. Corvin, her king. The moment their eyes locked across the stream, the world went silent. His eyes were not the intelligent, loving amber she remembered. They were vacant, golden pools of pure, raw instinct. He doesn't recognize me. Her heart skipped. This was worse than she imagined. Without warning, he looked up, his lip curling back to expose massive yellowed canines. A low, terrifying growl, a sound of pure territorial warning, ripped from his throat. "Corvin!" she barked, keeping her tone low, attempting to use the alpha command structure. "It's Lyanna. You're Luna." Instead of recognition, the primal growl intensified. As if summoned, the beast lunged. He shot across the stream with horrifying speed. Lyanna met the charge. This is not a battle. It's a desperate embrace. She didn't know what scared her more, his incredible power or the complete lack of intelligence in his attack. He fought with the brute force of a wild creature, devoid of the strategic skill that defined the Alpha King. They crashed together, fur against fur, bone against bone. Lyanna was powerful, but Corvin was savage. His size and feral rage overwhelmed her. What followed was a terrifying, vicious wrestling match in the cold mud. Lyanna fought with her blade strategy: dominance, pressure, and threat. She bit hard at his shoulder, hoping to force submission. But then, the pain only seemed to fuel his rage. He tossed her aside like she weighed nothing, sending her skidding across the wet bank. My blade fails. Deep down, she knew the truth. Force only met greater force. She scrambled up, her chest heaving, her wolf confused and frightened. She could defeat him, but she would have to wound him grievously, perhaps fatally, to subdue him. And that was unthinkable. That's why she backed away slowly, forcing herself into a posture of submission, trying to communicate with instinct alone. She whined, a soft, feminine plea, something she hadn't done since she was a cub. As her wolf stirred, Corvin paused. He saw the shift in her body language, the vulnerability. Instead of finishing her, he circled, confused, the instinctual desire to dominate clashing with some deep, forgotten memory. His response was a low, rumbling growl. He was a prisoner in his own body. After that, Corvin made his decision. He didn't attack again. He simply turned and vanished back into the deepest shadows of the ravine, running away from the confusing presence of his mate. Lyanna shifted back to her human form, collapsing onto the muddy ground. Her body ached, but her heart ached worse. As the echo faded of his retreat, she understood the first obstacle was not the hunt, it was the containment. More importantly, she realized her greatest fear was true. Her blade, her ultimate weapon of defense, was useless against the man she loved. She had faced him with her strength and failed. If I can't command him, how do I save him? Her thoughts spun. The answer was terrifyingly clear. She had to use what she had deliberately buried. Her core strength, unconditional, restorative love. She had to try to love the beast back into a king. But then, she heard the distant sound of Valerius's hunting horn. Time was running out. She had to find a way to trap the feral king before Valerius's hunters found him and executed him for the bounty. This was now a desperate race against the clock. Chapter 8. The Containment Trap. Despite that, the failure to subdue Corvin didn't break Lyanna. It focused her. As the air thickened with the smell of the coming evening chill, she hiked back to their temporary camp, her mind racing. "Ilara," Lyanna said, her voice quiet but firm. "My attempt to find the king failed. His mind is gone. He is running on pure primal defense. We cannot approach him with force." "Then what, Luna?" Ilara asked, passing a roasted piece of stag to Lysander. "We need a trap," Lyanna stated, taking a deep breath. "Not a cage for a prisoner, but a safe enclosure for a scared animal. Something he chooses to enter." That's why Lyanna spent the next hour with Ilara scouting a ravine she remembered from her youth. Next, she found the perfect spot, a large, dry cave deep within the darkest part of the gorge, accessible only through a narrow, defensible entrance. What followed was a frantic, focused preparation. Lyanna, Ilara, and even the older children helped, driven by the knowledge that their father's life depended on their success. Under the weight of his stare, the memory of Corvin's feral gaze fueling her, Lyanna directed them to create a comfortable, deeply scented den inside the cave. They didn't use rope or iron bars, which would incite Corvin's fear. Instead, they used thick blankets she had secured from the Citadel, old items that smelled distinctly of her, of their children, and of Corvin's old study, sense of home and authority. "We need the scent of us," Lyanna explained to Ilara. "We're not trying to bind his body. We're trying to appeal to the king's memory inside the beast." More importantly, Lyanna placed a small, simple wooden carving of a wolf pup in the center of the blankets. It was a carving Corvin had made for Lysander years ago, his king's initials scratched into the base. It was a tangible anchor to his past. "This is the bait," Lyanna said, touching the worn wood. "If anything can reach the civilized man inside the feral one, it is the memory of his children, and the Luna who loves him." With every heartbeat, Lyanna felt a terrifying vulnerability settling over her. She was staking everything on the power of emotion, something she had just convinced herself was a weakness. As her world tilted, she realized this was the true turning point, shedding the "blade alone suffices" misbelief. She had to be soft to survive. Just like that, everything changed. They had built the trap. Now they had to wait for the king to come home. Meanwhile, Valerius's hunters were getting closer. With his scent in the air, the low, acrid smell of fire and organized pursuit, Lyanna knew they were running out of time. They had found the abandoned citadel and were now sweeping the wilds in tight formations. That night, Lyanna sat guard at the mouth of the gorge, Ilara and the children safely hidden. She held the last item of comfort she had brought from the citadel, a leather wristband Corvin had worn every day of their marriage. In the stillness that followed, she pressed it to her face, inhaling the faint ghost scent of him, remembering the man who loved her fiercely. Then she heard it, the snap of a heavy branch far up the gorge. The feral king was returning. As if pulled by a string, Lyanna prepared herself not for battle, but for an agonizing test of love and memory. The test of the true crown. Chapter 9. The First Taming. The air thickened with the smell of wet fur and primal fear. Lyanna waited at the mouth of the cave, motionless in her human form, the leather wristband, Corvin's, clasped tight in her hand. The feral king emerged from the shadows of the gorge. He was magnificent and heartbreaking, a massive silhouette against the faint moonlight, his head low, tracking the unfamiliar scent of the soft blankets and the familiar scent of her. The moment their eyes locked, Lyanna did not move, did not growl, and did not threaten. She didn't use the blade. She used the memory. "Corvin," she whispered, her voice low and steady, laced with all the love she had suppressed. Look at me." Instead of lunging with fury, the feral king stopped. He paced, confused, the instinct to attack fighting the deeper, more powerful instinct of the pack bond. His muscles bunched and released beneath the matted fur. He was listening. As if pulled by a string, Lyanna slowly knelt. She pressed the wristband to her chest. "Remember the war, my king?" she murmured, her voice filled with soft, rhythmic sorrow. "Remember the night you gave me this, before you left?" She didn't demand his obedience. She offered him pity and connection. In the quiet that followed, Corvin made a low, pained sound. Not a growl, but a mournful, confused whine. Whine. He took a hesitant step toward her, then another, his massive head lowering. With his scent in the air, thick with fear and trauma, Lyanna could smell the confusion radiating off him. He was fighting the feral impulse. Next, Lyanna did the most dangerous thing she could imagine. She extended her empty hand, offering her wrist, the softest, most vulnerable part of a wolf's body. As the bond pulsed, she felt the risk. One snap, and it was over. But then, instead of snapping, Corvin nudged her hand gently. The touch was warm and rough, a profound connection. Her bones remembered him. Lyanna allowed herself a small, silent cry of relief. "You're safe here, my love. We are safe." After that, she rose and slowly backed into the cave, never breaking eye contact. She let him follow, leading him like a scared child into the scent-laden den. By the time Corvin was finally curled up on the blankets, his heavy panting slowing, the small wooden wolf pup nestled beneath his chin. He wasn't healed. He was still half feral, prone to unpredictable rages, but for the first time since his return, he was contained. This was a fleeting success. It validated her decision to choose love over force. She had reached him. Yet, the political world had not stopped turning. As the truth unraveled, a new, much louder sound carried on the crisp night air. Not the distant hunting horn of Valerius's patrols, but the unmistakable, coordinated blare of a full military coup starting in the distant citadel. Lyanna stiffened, her fleeting moment of victory dissolving into dread. Valerius wasn't hunting a single wolf anymore. He was seizing a kingdom. Chapter 10. The Midpoint Coup. Come morning, Alara returned from a daring overnight scout, her face grim. "It is done, Luna," she whispered, shivering despite the heavy furs. "Valerius is holding a public ceremony at the Citadel. He presented a shredded banner, claiming it was from the king's mad den, proof of your savagery and the king's demise." "He claimed Corvin is dead?" Lyanna asked, glancing into the cave where the feral king slept fitfully, his low growls sounding like grinding stones. "Worse, he claimed the king is permanently broken, a creature of the wilds, and you are a feral lunatic who ran away after murdering your own children. He is declaring himself Alpha Regent, citing the threat of your lineage. What's worse," Alara revealed, "he has secured a vote of support from 3 minor houses. The Citadel gates are draped in his banner. The kingdom believes him." Lyanna felt a familiar, cold fury, but this time it was tempered with strategy. He used my truth, the feral instinct, to justify his lie. Because of that, the stakes were no longer about her family's safety. They were about the legitimacy of the entire royal line. Valerius wasn't just a rival. He was a traitor who was currently occupying their home. "He knows the kingdom won't rally to my defense if they think I'm a beast," Lyanna realized, her hands clenching into fists. "But they will rally for the Alpha King." In that moment, the path became clear. Lyanna had to stop fighting to survive and start fighting to restore. She had to heal Corvin, for his king's authority was the only thing that could swiftly shatter Valerius's false claim. Her core strength, love, was now the kingdom's only weapon. With every heartbeat, Lyanna shed the last vestiges of her "Blade Alone Suffices" misbelief. She looked at the king, sleeping like a wounded giant. Healing him would be agonizing, dangerous, and slow. "We commit," Lyanna told Alara, her voice ringing with finality. "No more running. We hide here and we fix our king. We need a way to reach his mind, Alara, not his body." As the truth unraveled, Lyanna knew this commitment was a point of no return. They were sacrificing speed and security for the arduous, uncertain task of emotional restoration. Next, Lyanna needed an object, something small, significant, and charged with memory. She needed a way to penetrate the trauma that held Corvin captive. "The children," Lyanna said, her eyes suddenly bright. "They are the strongest link to his mind." Soon after, Lyanna approached Lysander, her oldest. She knelt and spoke simply. "Your father needs to remember who he is, my cub. You need to remind him." Chapter 11. The Anchor of Memory. She didn't know what scared her more, bringing her children near the feral king or failing to save him. Lyanna led Lysander, her 8-year-old, to the mouth of the cave. The air inside smelled strongly of the sleeping wolf, thick and unsettling. Lysander was trembling, but his gaze was steady. "He won't hurt us, Mama?" Lysander whispered, his small hand gripping Lyanna's tunic. "The beast won't," Lyanna promised, gently rubbing his back. "But the king will fight through, my love. You are his son. You are his anchor." That's why she was doing this, because the bond of father and son was elemental, deeper than war trauma. Despite that, the moment Lysander stepped into the cave, the feral king stirred. Corvin's eyes snapped open, blazing with primal golden light. He was instantly on the defensive, the confusion gone, replaced by predatory suspicion. Corvin's response was a guttural, warning, "Grr! Grr!" "Stay back," Lyanna commanded, but her voice was not a warrior's threat. It was a mother's shield. She stood between her son and the snarling beast, forcing herself to maintain a posture of absolute calm. Instead of moving forward, Lysander lifted his hand. In it, he held a small, smooth stone, painted crudely with red berry juice, a wolf family crest he had drawn. "Papa?" Lysander's voice was small but clear. "You taught me how to find the red berries by the river. You said they were the color of the blood we share." Lyanna watched, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. This was the test. Would the beast see prey, or would the king hear memory? As the silence stretched, Corvin stared at the boy and the stone. His breathing was rapid, shallow, but the aggressive snarl slowly softened, replaced by a devastating look of blank incomprehension. He was trying to reconcile the threat with the love. In the echo of his voice, or the lack thereof, Lyanna heard her own plea. She stepped aside, exposing herself completely. "He is Lysander," Lyanna whispered, tears finally tracing tracks down her cheeks. "Your son, my king. He remembers your kindness. Remember him. Remember us." But then, something cracked. A tiny, almost imperceptible flicker of recognition crossed Corvin's eyes. It was gone immediately, replaced by the blank mask of the beast, but Lyanna had seen it. She felt it, clear as day, a fleeting return of the soul she loved. The feral king dropped his head onto the blankets, exhausted by the battle in his mind. He didn't harm the boy. He simply closed his eyes and hid himself away. After that, Lyanna scooped up her son, shaking with adrenaline. "You were so brave, my cub, so brave." Just like that, everything changed. The risk was worth it. The family bond was the key. Lyanna knew the process would be long, painful, and dangerous, but she had confirmation. Corvin was salvageable. Next, they needed protection. They were anchored here, vulnerable. Meanwhile, Valerius's forces were tightening the noose, confident they were hunting a single, mad woman. Lyanna had to plan her next move, a small, desperate strike to confuse the hunters and buy them time for the healing to continue. Her heart skipped. The healing began now, but survival required the blade to be drawn, even if it wasn't aimed at her husband. Chapter 12. The Huntress's Gamble. The air thickened with the scent of Valerius's approaching patrols. Lyanna could hear the methodical snap of twigs, the low, cautious whispers of trained soldiers. They were hunting her, the feral lunatic, and they were getting dangerously close to the gorge. Lyanna stood at the mouth of the cave, looking back at the dark interior where Corvin lay, slowly recovering his mind. With every heartbeat, she knew she had to act. Because of that, she had to become the very monster Valerius claimed she was, temporarily. "Alara," Lyanna whispered, shifting into her massive black wolf form. The transformation felt seamless now. Her skin and bones remembered the shape of power more readily than the shape of a queen. "Stay with the king and the children. Do not let anything in." Without another word, she melted into the shadows. Her goal was simple: deception. She needed to draw the hunters far to the north and lead them on a false, deadly trail. As her wolf stirred, Lyanna ran silently, keeping low to the ground. She intentionally left subtle signs, a snapped branch, a fresh track, leading in the opposite direction from the gorge. She was a master hunter, but now she was playing prey. Meanwhile, two of Valerius's alpha captains, Varus and Tauren, were closing in on the initial area. They were arrogant, smelling of iron and authority, and eager for the bounty. "The tracks lead north, Varus," Tauren grunted, following the path Lyanna laid. "She's running scared." But then Varus, a more seasoned hunter, sniffed the air. His response was a low, rumbling growl. "No, this scent, it's fresh, too strong, it smells like a challenge." Lyanna heard them. She felt it, clear as day, their arrogance. Perfect. Next, she executed her plan. She ran to a high, exposed ridge and let out a single, massive, blood-curdling hool, hool. The full, untamed cry of a pack alpha, claiming territory and mocking its rivals. The sound ripped through the silent wilds, chilling Varus and Tauren to the bone. "She's taunting us," Tauren gasped, his eyes wide. "No, she's trying to lead us away," Varus corrected, but the rage in his eyes was fierce. "She is mocking the might of the regent. We will not be defeated by a feral female." In that moment, Lyanna had them. She had successfully played on their pride, confirming the rumors of the mad Luna. She had bought time for Corvin. What followed was a dizzying chase. Lyanna ran like the wind, leading them far away, sometimes pausing to let them see her silver-tipped black fur flash between the trees. She used the terrain, cliffs, waterfalls, and rock slides, to increase the distance and exhaust her pursuers. Yet, even as she ran with feral speed, her thoughts were of the cave. "I am the blade now, but only to protect the healer." As her heart skipped, Lyanna heard the distant snap of a rifle, a human weapon that Valerius's forces were using illegally. The danger was real, cold, and calculated. After that, she ran until the light began to fade, doubling back through dense water, destroying her own scent trail completely. She had bought them 24 hours, maybe less. The descent was difficult. Lyanna collapsed near the cave mouth, shifting back to human, breathing hard, covered in mud and pine needles. Her body moved on instinct, crawling into the cave to check on her family. More importantly, she needed to see Corvin. She needed to anchor her wild soul back to her love. Chapter 13. The Scarred King's Lucidity. The cave was quiet, warm with the bodies of her sleeping children. In the quiet that followed, Alara met Lyanna's eyes, a silent question passing between them. Did it work? Lyanna nodded grimly, then looked to Corvin. He was awake. He was sitting up against the cold stone, massive and still terrifying, but his eyes. The moment their eyes locked, the gold was muted, clouded, but there was a flicker of recognition. "Lyanna?" His voice was a raw, unused rasp, thick with the primal growls of the last months. It was the first time he had spoken her name. Her voice trembled as she hurried to his side. "Corvin, my love, I'm here." He reached out a massive, scarred hand, a hand that had ruled a kingdom and now barely remembered how to grip a cup. Instead of grabbing her, he reached for her face, his touch surprisingly gentle. "The wolves. They hurt me," he murmured, his brow furrowed with ancient pain. His trauma was visible. Lyanna sank down, pressing her head into his chest, inhaling his familiar kingly scent mixed now with wild musk and fear. "I know, my king, but they can't hurt you here. You're home." With every heartbeat, she fought back her own tears. "This is the man I married. The king who loved me." "Valerius," Corvin rasped, the name pulling him back to the political world. "He betrayed us. He used her." Lyanna knew he meant the Luna's war council sister, who had always resented Lyanna. Corvin remembered the political details, but not the simple act of eating. The healing was piecemeal. As her wolf stirred, Lyanna pulled back slightly, looking into his eyes. "We must be careful, Corvin. You are not strong yet. Valerius is claiming the kingdom is empty. That's why we are hiding. We need your strength, your authority, to rally the loyalists." He was listening. His memory wasn't a constant flame, but a spark that she could fan with shared memories. Lyanna pressed the leather wristband back into his palm. "Remember the first full moon? When you chased me through the woods and promised me the moon?" Corvin closed his hand around the leather. A low, tender sound, a purr, escaped him. It was the sound of the mate, not the beast. In the echo of his voice, or the purr, Corvin leaned in, his heavy forehead pressing against hers. Between them, something cracked. It wasn't just physical desire. It was the intense, desperate reunion of two souls ripped apart by war and trauma. She felt it, clear as day, the deep, restorative power of their bond rushing through her. Just like that, everything changed. The feral king was momentarily eclipsed by the loving king. Lyanna was committed. She knew, without a doubt, that this intimacy, this emotional and physical reconnection was the only weapon that could truly defeat Valerius. Next, their moment of desperate intimacy was sharply interrupted by the return of danger. Chapter 14, The Ring of Fire. Moments later, the quiet intimacy of the cave was shattered by a new scent. Smoke. Lyanna broke away from Corvin, her senses immediately on high alert. Without warning, she smelled the fear and the pine, but underneath it all, the thick, acrid scent of deliberate fire. "They've found the region," she whispered to Alara, who was instantly awake, sword in hand. What's worse, the scent of fire was everywhere. Valerius wasn't bothering with tracking anymore. He was burning the wilds to smoke out the feral threat. "They're creating a ring," Lyanna realized, her eyes wide with fear. "They're pushing everything, prey and predator, toward the central ravines." As the truth unraveled, they knew the cave would soon become an oven. They had to move, but moving the semi-lucid, volatile king was a monumental risk. Lyanna's internal monologue was a flurry of simple, stark questions. Do I wake him fully? Do I sedate him? Can I carry him and the children? That's why she made a desperate choice. She shifted into the wolf, her silver-tipped black fur bristling with fear and adrenaline. "Alara, take the children," Lyanna barked, her voice low and demanding. "Go west, toward the abandoned river outpost. I will buy you time. I will draw the fire away from you." "Lyanna, that's suicide. They have rifles," Alara protested, fear making her voice shake. "I am the Blade. I am the mother of wolves," Lyanna snarled, embracing the role she was about to play. Because she was the most powerful wolf, she was the only one who could risk the distraction. Without another word, Lyanna shot out of the cave. Next, she ran directly toward the thickest line of fire, a black shadow against the advancing orange glow. As the wind shifted, the intense heat hit her. The air was thick with ash and the terrifying cracking sound of dry timber exploding. She found a gap in the ring, a narrow pass guarded by two of Valerius's men. In the span of a breath, Lyanna attacked. She didn't use stealth. She used shock and terror. She was a weapon, a blur of teeth and claws snarling with a demonic fury. The two men went down instantly, their screams muffled by the encroaching flames. She ran through the gap, intentionally leaving a clear, fresh trail of her scent leading north, directly away from Alara and the children. As if pulled by a string, the fire-setters saw the massive black wolf running, heading deeper into the mountains. They altered their course, chasing the obvious target. Lyanna had committed. She was heading into a dangerous, isolated region, leaving her family behind, a terrible sacrifice. But deep down, she knew the truth. Their separation, though agonizing, would ensure their survival. She had gambled her life to buy Corvin the time he needed to finally become king again. The ring of fire closed behind her, cutting her off from the gorge. Under the weight of his stare, the king's lucid gaze, she felt the searing pain of their separation, but also the deep resolve of her commitment. She was truly alone now, facing the enemy head-on. Chapter 15. The Predator's Snare. The air thickened with the scent of pine, ash, and the cold metal of human weapons. Lyanna was exhausted. She had run for 2 days, leading Valerius's main hunting force on a brutal, twisting path through the high, rocky ridges of the north. Her body moved on instinct, relying on adrenaline and the frantic, distant knowledge that she was buying time for Corvin. Because of that, she was pushing past the limits of physical endurance, running on pure maternal will. Meanwhile, the hunters were organized and relentless. Valerius wasn't chasing a wolf. He was conducting a military operation. But then, Lyanna realized she had been funneled. She burst through a thicket of stunted spruce trees and found herself trapped on a wide, snowy ledge overlooking a deep chasm. There was no escape. Without warning, Valerius himself stepped out of the shadows, flanked by 10 heavily armed wolves and 4 human guards carrying rifles, weapons Valerius now flaunted as the new authority. Lyanna. The feral lunatic, Valerius sneered, his voice ringing with cold satisfaction. Did you truly think you could outrun my entire garrison? Valerius's antagonist goal was clear: humiliation and execution to cement his power. Lyanna did not shift back. She remained a massive, black-furred menace, snarling defiance. You are a traitor, Valerius, a scavenger who feeds on a broken pack. His response was a low, rumbling laugh. A beautiful metaphor, Luna. But look around. I have numbers. I have steel. And you, Lyanna, have only your pathetic, savage rage. As her wolf stirred, Lyanna launched her attack, aiming for the arrogance in Valerius's eyes. She fought with the terrifying fury of a trapped animal, a whirlwind of muscle and teeth. She disabled 2 wolves instantly, her claws tearing through their defenses. What followed was a brief, brutal, magnificent display of Lyanna's raw power. Yet, Valerius was prepared. He gave a sharp command, and the 4 human guards opened fire, not with silver, but with paralyzing electrified nets designed for large game. The nets slammed into Lyanna. The shock was immediate and blindingly painful. She collapsed, thrashing violently, her powerful limbs tangled and useless. The stench of burned fur and ozone filled the air. In that moment, Lyanna was utterly defeated. Her strength, her blade, overwhelmed by technology and superior numbers. Valerius approached slowly, savoring his victory. He placed a heavy, arrogant boot on her throat. You sacrificed your children for this, Luna? Just to die alone in the snow? As the truth unraveled, Lyanna felt the cold reality of her capture. She couldn't fight. She couldn't protect. She had failed Corvin. Next, Valerius ordered the net secured. To make things worse, he lifted her head by the fur, forcing her to look at him. I need your official king, Valerius whispered, leaning close. I need proof of his death to claim the full crown. Tell me where the feral king is hiding, Lyanna, or I will find your cubs. Her heart skipped. Her silence was the only shield her children had left. She refused to speak, only meeting his eyes with pure, unadulterated hatred. But then Valerius smiled, a chilling, predatory curve of his lips. It doesn't matter. You bought him time, but you cannot buy him sanity. He will relapse, and when he does, he will lead us straight to your pathetic hiding place." The moment their eyes locked, Lyanna felt a chill that went deeper than the paralyzing net. He knew the primal truth. Trauma always wins. Chapter 16. The Accidental Betrayal. Meanwhile, miles away in the hidden gorge, the feral king was roaring. The lucid peace Corvin had found the previous night had vanished. Lyanna's scent, the anchor of his sanity, was gone, replaced by the acrid, lingering smell of the distant fire and the heavy scent of his own fear. In the stillness that followed, Corvin paced the small cave, his massive frame radiating volatility. The air thickened with his rising distress. Where is she? Alara stood guard at the mouth of the cave, terrified. The children were huddled together, weeping silently. "He's getting worse," Alara whispered, clutching her sword. "He won't stop pacing. He won't eat. He's going feral again." With every heartbeat, Corvin's memory faded. He saw Alara not as a trusted guard, but as an intruder protecting his precious cubs. The primal instinct to protect the den clashed violently with the trauma that told him everyone was a threat. As her wolf stirred, Alara's, fear pressed against her throat. He's going to attack. Without warning, Corvin lunged for the cave entrance, attempting to escape the confinement that was driving him mad. Alara bravely stepped in front of him, sword raised. "Corvin, no!" she yelled, using the Alpha King's name in a desperate attempt to trigger memory. The feral king struck. It wasn't a malicious attack, but a blind, panicked swipe designed to clear his path. Corvin's heavy paw slammed against Alara, sending her sprawling, the sword clattering uselessly on the stone. What followed was agonizing. One of the children, little 8-year-old Lysander, seeing his mother's loyal guard struck down, panicked and bolted. "Lysander, no!" Alara screamed, scrambling up. As if pulled by a string, the boy ran directly toward the mouth of the gorge, and straight into a secondary patrol of Valerius's men who were sweeping the perimeter. Just like that, everything changed. The feral king hadn't intended to hurt anyone, but his accidental relapse led directly to the capture of the heir. The patrol, stunned but triumphant, seized the boy. Next, one of the patrolmen found the king's old wristband, the anchor Lyanna had given him, lying near the cave mouth where Corvin had lost it in his panic. "We have the pup!" the soldier yelled, holding up the terrified Lysander. "And look, a royal token. This is the exact location." Corvin, standing dazed in the cave mouth, saw the sight. His son captured, his mate's loyal guard injured, and the scent of human victory filling the air. He collapsed onto the cold stone, the shame and confusion overwhelming his fragmented mind. He had betrayed them all. His heart skipped. The relapse was complete. Chapter 17. The Lowest Point, Dark Night of the Soul. By the time Lyanna was dragged, bruised, and tangled in the electrified net back to the Citadel's dungeons, the worst news was waiting for her. She was tossed onto the cold, damp stone of a subterranean kennel. The smell was suffocating, mildew, fear, and the distant, arrogant scent of Valerius. In the stillness that followed, Valerius came to her cage. He didn't gloat, he simply delivered the death blow. "Your heroic sacrifice was useless, Lyanna," he whispered, standing just out of reach. "Your savage king, the one you risked your life to protect, betrayed you." "What's worse?" Valerius smiled as he recounted the scene. "He panicked, Lyanna. He pushed his loyal guard aside and drove your oldest cub straight into my men's arms. I now have Lysander. Your son is my guest." Lyanna's physical pain vanished, replaced by a cold, crushing agony. Lysander. Because she chose love and vulnerability, she lost her son. Her world tilted. Lyanna felt every single emotional wound she had suppressed explode open. The blade had been clean, the love was messy, dangerous, and had cost her everything. My unconditional love failed, she thought, the realization shattering her. It didn't tame the beast, it only exposed my son to the beast. You wanted proof of his madness, Valerius taunted, throwing the king's leather wristband onto the floor of her cage. Your own blood delivered it to me. I now have the king's feral den, I have his cub, and I have the queen who ran mad. Deep down, she knew the truth. Valerius was right. Her internal flaw, the blade alone suffices, felt validated. If she had been ruthless, if she had never softened, if she had relied only on her feral strength, she might have succeeded. She didn't know what scared her more, the thought of Lysander in Valerius's hands, or the utter despair that settled over her heart. Yet even in the depths of her pain, Valerius hadn't won completely. I still have 2 children free, Lyanna rasped, forcing the words through her bruised throat. True, Valerius conceded. As the air thickened, he delivered the final psychological blow. But when I bring Lysander out to the Citadel Square tomorrow, and I ask the feral king to choose between his mad queen and his new regent, I wonder which one Corvin will attack first. Valerius left her alone in the darkness. Lyanna was trapped, defeated, and her family was scattered, broken, and poisoned by her own loving choice. Her soul answered the darkness with a devastating silence. The feral crown was a crown of ashes. She had hit her lowest point, but then something tiny stirred in the dark corner of her cage. A small, familiar scent of pine. Ilara, her most loyal guard, was here. As if summoned, Lyanna felt a tiny flicker of defiance. The final battle was not lost, just horribly changed. Chapter 18. The Whisper of Defiance. The air thickened with the smell of mildew and defeat in the deep dungeons. Lyanna lay in the cold kennel, the electrified net having been removed, leaving her muscles burning and useless. Her spirit felt worse. But then a small familiar scent of pine and fresh earth reached her nose. As if summoned, a tiny gray field mouse, a common pack familiar, darted into her cage. In the stillness that followed, Lyanna watched the mouse. It paused, sniffed her hand, and deposited a tightly folded piece of paper beneath her palm. Lyanna's heart skipped. Ilara. Without warning, Lyanna snatched the paper and crushed the mouse gently in her hand, a familiar gesture of thanks and protection before slipping the note beneath her tongue. The note was brief, written in tiny, hurried script. We are safe. Corvin is contained but weak. We wait for your command. Find the key. The whisper of defiance. Lyanna felt a surge of adrenaline so powerful it overcame the paralyzing pain. Her children were safe. Corvin was still contained. The ultimate sacrifice, her life, had bought them time. She felt it, clear as day, the desperate resolve settling into her bones. Valerius had taken Lysander, but he hadn't broken the family. Next, she had to find the key Ilara mentioned, the key to freedom. She scanned the dark cell, her eyes, now fully human but sharp as a wolf's, darting over the stone. After that, she saw it, a tiny, almost invisible fissure in the mortar between 2 foundation stones near the back wall. As the echo faded of Valerius's sneer, Lyanna worked the mortar loose with her fingernail until a small iron skeleton key, smelling faintly of the king's old private armory, clattered into her hand. Ilara and her network are better than I thought. Lyanna's internal monologue was a flurry of simple, stark questions. I have the key. I have the motive, Lysander. But how do I win? That's why she closed her eyes, forcing herself to stop reacting with the wounded frenzy of the feral queen, and instead think with the cold calculation of the blade. Valerius wants spectacle, Lyanna murmured, the sound scratchy in the dark. He wants to destroy the king's reputation and my own sanity in front of the pack. Truth be told, her original plan failed because she didn't realize the power of her enemy's propaganda. More importantly, she realized the truth about the taming. Love alone wasn't enough. It needed authority. Corvin needed to be restored not just as a mate, but as a king. The final plan was born. The showdown must be public. She wouldn't save Corvin in a cave. She would save him on the Citadel steps, where his healed authority could rally the pack and delegitimize Valerius's coup. With a single glance, Lyanna knew the risk was immense. Corvin was still unstable, but it was the only path that saved Lysander and the kingdom. As her world tilted, Lyanna rose, her aching muscles screaming in protest. She was the weapon, but love was the target. She was ready to be both. Chapter 19. The Gambit of the Queen. Lyanna's body moved on instinct. The old armory key slid easily into the lock of her dungeon cage. The snick was terrifyingly loud in the dead silence of the subterranean cell. Instead of rushing out, Lyanna waited, listening to the shift change above. As the silence stretched, she moved. She knew the old tunnels of the Citadel better than anyone. She and Corvin had used them often for clandestine meetings and late-night rendezvous. In the echo of his voice, the memory guiding her, she followed the dark, airless passages upwards. Next, she found the armory. As if pulled by a string, her fingers went straight to a familiar rack. She didn't take a heavy sword. She took a thin, flexible scimitar, a specialized dueling weapon, and a small, dense leather vest, easy to hide under her ragged clothes. She was moving fast, thinking like a hunted creature. But then she heard muffled voices. Two of Valerius's guards were walking down the main tunnel toward the dungeon. Without warning, Lyanna flattened herself against the cold stone, willing herself to be invisible. They passed, smelling of stale fear and cheap wine. Valerius's men are complacent, she realized. They think they've won. After that, she continued her ascent, emerging into the courtyard under the heavy blanket of the pre-dawn darkness. With his scent in the air, she smelled the proximity of Valerius's main barracks, and the faint, panicked scent of Lysander being held captive in the old chapel. More importantly, she saw her loyalists. 3 figures, loyal, veteran wolves, waited by the outer stables, smelling faintly of anxiety and readiness. "Luna?" Commander Gale whispered, relief making his voice crack. "Lysander is in the chapel," Lyanna hissed, her voice low and sharp. "Valerius plans to use him to break the king publicly today. We have only hours. That's why she gave them the final, crucial order. You will go to the shadowed wilds. You will find Alara and the king. Tell Alara, bring him to the Citadel steps at the 2nd hour past dawn. Bring him whole. Bring him with the children, but keep them hidden until I give the signal. Because the signal had to be unmistakable. Because it had to be tied to the moment Valerius thought he had won." The air thickened with their shared purpose. Gale nodded, his old eyes gleaming with battle lust. She felt it, clear as day, a renewed, desperate hope. She was gambling her life on a single, high-stakes moment of public confrontation. Lyanna had to survive to give the signal. As the truth unraveled, Lyanna left her loyalists and slipped back into the shadows. She found a high vantage point overlooking the Citadel steps, the abandoned bell tower. "I will wait for the dawn, and I will wait for my king to return to his throne." Chapter 20. The Rising Sun. Come morning, the Citadel steps were swarming. Banners bearing Valerius's cruel crest, a broken crown, flew everywhere. The pack members were gathering, confused and nervous, filling the courtyard below Lyanna's hiding place in the abandoned bell tower. Lyanna was a shadow among the rusted bells, the scent of dust and fear clinging to her. With every heartbeat, she watched the staging below. Valerius, resplendent in stolen royal silks, stood at the top of the steps. His gaze was cold, arrogant, radiating false authority. More importantly, Lyanna saw Lysander. The boy was led out of the chapel and stood beside Valerius, a small, terrified pawn. Lyanna's fists clenched, her nails digging into her palms. "I will kill you, Valerius, if it is the last thing I do." She didn't know what scared her more, Valerius's confidence, or the fact that Corvin's restoration was still a fragile thing, dependent on memory and love. If the sight of Valerius and the captive Lysander triggered a feral rage, Corvin might attack his own son. As the bond pulsed, Lyanna sent a silent, desperate mental plea. "Be whole, my king." Remember your queen. Remember your authority." But then, Valerius began to speak, his voice amplified by magic, reaching every corner of the courtyard. "The feral queen is captured, the false king is broken, the throne is vacant. Today, we reclaim our strength and begin the era of the regent." The crowd was tense, wavering between fear and reluctant acceptance. In the quiet that followed, Valerius prepared the final, crushing moment of his coup. He raised his hand, signaling a guard. Next, the guard brought out a large, heavy cage covered in a dark cloth. "And now," Valerius shouted triumphantly, "I present the ultimate proof of the old line's madness, the final remnant of the savage king, who betrayed his own bloodline." As the truth unraveled, the guard ripped the cloth away. Inside the cage was a creature, large, shaggy, and snarling, but not Corvin. It was a massive, scarred, brown-furred wolf Lyanna immediately recognized as Vorlag, the northern bear, the rival alpha who began the external threats. Valerius hadn't just defeated his enemies, he had captured and humiliated them. Lyanna's heart skipped. He's using Vorlag as the scapegoat. He thinks Corvin is just a corpse. Valerius's arrogance was his biggest weakness. Just like that, everything changed. The stage was set for a public spectacle. Valerius prepared to crown himself. With a single glance, Lyanna saw a silent, determined shadow move on the outskirts of the crowd, smelling of pine and deep forest. Alara was here. Lyanna knew her moment was now. The climax was seconds away. She reached into her hidden vest and pulled out a single, ancient iron coin, a small, heavy piece of metal used to symbolize the king's oath. She raised the coin, took aim, and threw it with precision toward the citadel steps. This was the signal. Chapter 21. The Climax. Authority Restored. The moment the heavy iron coin clattered onto the citadel steps, everything froze. The coin landed precisely at Valerius's feet. The sound, a sharp, authoritative ping, cut through his victory speech. Valerius paused, confused, then looked up. Without warning, a massive figure erupted from the side of the chapel, moving with desperate speed. It was Corvin. As if pulled by a string, Alara and the two children had pushed him into the fray. He was still in human form, naked, scarred and covered in grime, smelling fiercely of the wilds. But he was moving. The crowd gasped. The sheer physical reality of the feral king was terrifying. Valerius, arrogant but quick, immediately pointed. "Seize the savage!" Valerius bellowed. "He's come for the boy! Protect the heir!" Next, Valerius's guards rushed to intercept Corvin, positioning themselves between the king and Lysander. But then, Lyanna dropped from the bell tower. She didn't use the rope. She calculated the trajectory, shifted to her full wolf form mid-air, and landed with a bone-jarring thud directly on the steps, between Corvin and Valerius's advancing line. The roar was deafening. It was a primal challenge, the sound of the mother of wolves defending her pack. In that moment, Lyanna did not attack Valerius. She focused entirely on Corvin. She shifted back to human, her silver-tipped fur condensing into her massive, terrifying human body. Corvin, confused by the chaos and the sight of his queen, snarled, his eyes glazing over with the feral gold. The relapse was imminent. He saw the threat, Valerius, and the confusion, Lyanna. She didn't know what scared her more, his rage or the thought that she might lose him now. "Corvin, look at me," Lyanna cried, ignoring Valerius and the surrounding guards. She ran to him, ignoring the exposed scimitar at her side. She felt it, clear as day, the primal energy in him ready to explode. Instead of fighting it, Lyanna embraced him. She pulled his massive, scarred face to hers and kissed him. A deep, desperate kiss, filled with all the unconditional love she had saved. "Remember, my king," she whispered, her voice rough against his ear. "Remember the king you are. Remember our blood." The moment their eyes locked, the chaotic, feral gold in Corvin's eyes flickered, fought, and then snapped back to the intelligent, loving amber of the Alpha King. He recognized her. He recognized the smell of his home. Just like that, everything changed. Corvin drew a massive, shuddering breath. He was still weak, still scarred, but the king's mind was restored. He looked past Lyanna, his gaze locking onto Valerius, who stood frozen in disbelief. Corvin's response was a low, devastatingly authoritative growl. Growl. A sound that echoed with the weight of centuries of power. "Traitor," Corvin rasped, his voice now regaining its deep resonance. "You will not touch my son. You will not touch my queen." With a single glance, the restored king reached out, not for his scimitar, but for Lysander. He pulled his son into a fierce, protective embrace. The image was undeniable. The king is restored. The family is whole. Next, the climax shifted entirely. The pack members watching below began to cheer. Their true alpha was back, saved by his Luna. Valerius, realizing his coup had evaporated, lunged for his own sword, aiming for the boy. Corvin fought with renewed, controlled king's authority, using strategy and strength. Lyanna fought with feral fury, the blade, covering his back, protecting his blind spots. They were a unified force, an ancient power. After that, the battle was swift. Lyanna disabled the guards while Corvin, driven by restored instinct and pure rage, drove Valerius to his knees. The traitor was defeated, the false crown shattered. Chapter 22. The Queen's Scars. The sun was high now, warm on the citadel steps, drying the small pools of spilled blood. Valerius was dragged away by the newly invigorated loyalist guards, his face a mask of bitter, defeated hate. In the quiet that followed, the courtyard erupted in cheers. The pack had its true king back, and they had witnessed the power of their Luna. Corvin and Lyanna embraced. It wasn't the passionate fury of the wilds. It was a deep, bone-weary reunion. Corvin was covered in mud and scars, but his eyes were clear, full of love and gratitude. Lyanna was bruised, her tunic ripped, but she was whole. She felt it, clear as day, the profound connection of two people who had survived a war and a terrible trauma together. Their scars mirrored each other, his physical, hers emotional. Corvin's voice was low, meant only for her. "You saved me, Luna. My mind was gone. Your love was the only thing I could smell through the rage." "I am the blade that guards your future, my king," Lyanna whispered, using her old vow, but understanding its new meaning, because the blade was meaningless without the love that guided it. As the bond pulsed, Corvin gathered his 3 children into his massive arms. Lysander, rescued and safe, clung to his father, finally realizing the man was king, not monster. That's why they stood together, the scarred king, the fierce Luna, and the 3 prophesied children, the living symbol of a restored pack. Meanwhile, Ilara stepped forward, handing Lyanna a heavy velvet cloak. "The people wait, Luna. They need to see their rulers." Next, they stepped forward, facing the cheering pack. The kingdom accepted the new reality. Their strength was familial, not just patriarchal. Chapter 23. The Feral Crown, New Equilibrium. The citadel was cleaned, the banners of Valerius burned and replaced with the true wolf crest. The official ceremony was held on the same steps where the climax occurred. Lyanna stood beside Corvin, dressed in simple regal white, no armor, no battle gear. She was the Luna, redefined. With a single glance, Corvin faced the gathered pack and his children. His voice was strong, resonating with the full force of his restored authority. "I stand here today king by blood, but I live by the grace of my queen," Corvin declared. As the echo faded, the crowd listened raptly. "When I was lost to the savagery of war, when my mind was broken and my pack scattered, the Luna was here. She did not rule with easy words. She ruled with feral sacrifice." What followed was the crowning. Corvin took the king's heavy gold circlet. but instead of placing it on his own head, he held it high. They call her Luna, my queen. They call her Lyanna, my mate. But today, before the sun, the stone, and the blood of our children, I declare her to be what she truly is. Corvin's eyes locked onto hers, filled with an eternal protective love. She is the mother of wolves, the living spirit of the pack. She is the heart that tamed the beast and restored the throne. Then Corvin placed the circlet on Lyanna's brow. It was a shared crown, a permanent shift in power and respect. Just like that, everything changed. The matriarchy was officially established as the core strength of the pack. As the bond pulsed with finality, Corvin leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. We rule together, my love. Always. The moment their eyes locked, Lyanna knew their family's love, tested by war, trauma, and betrayal, had become the eternal legacy that would bind all wolves together. Their reign would be one of fierce protection and restorative love. The pack roared its acceptance. The feral crown was now hers, worn not by a savage, but by the true, loving heart of the realm. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to this channel for more paranormal love stories, and also don't forget to hit the like button.